Hi everyone, welcome to my new channel, Rue's Storytime. Tonight's story will take you on a journey of kindness and bravery. A homeless boy gave back a lost wallet what he had requested in return, which made everyone cry. Where are you from? Tell us in the comments, don't forget to like and share, and don't miss the conclusion of the story and subscribe for more inspiring and captivating tales. Tyler Grant, 14, who had been homeless for almost 2 years, stumbled upon a leather wallet in the snow on a bitterly cold night in Detroit, Michigan, on December 12, 2005. Inside were hundreds of dollars in cash, a spotless driver's license, and credit cards belonging to a man named Richard Sullivan. The world had not been kind to Tyler. His fingers were frozen, and his stomach was empty, but what he did next would start a dramatic chain of events that would come to an end. For decades, secrets were kept hidden. Tyler had no reason to know Richard Sullivan, but he wasn't ready for the confrontation that would await him when he discovered the address on the ID and walked 5 miles to return the wallet. When Richard answered the door of his opulent suburban home, he saw a thin lad in baggy clothing holding out a wallet. "Sir, I believe this is yours," Tyler said, his voice shaking from the cold that had crept into his very bones rather than fear. "You could have kept the money, so why return it?" "I need more than money," Tyler mumbled, looking back at the shadows of the dark street. Richard had to lean in to hear him since his words were so quiet. "I need your assistance in finding my mother." The next name Tyler told him made Richard freeze, sending a chill down his spine. Tyler was gripping the wallet as if it were his only chance, even though I'm not sure whether she's still alive. "Her name is Elaine Grant, and she vanished 2 years ago." Elaine Grant was a name he had not heard of in over 10 years, and for reasons he could not explain, Richard's face went pale. As he hesitated, a woman's silhouette emerged behind him. His wife Margaret stepped forward, her face showing a mixture of confusion and unease. "Who's at the door?" Margaret gazed at Richard Tyler with a brief expression of familiarity in her eyes, as though she had seen a ghost, which I will explain later. When Tyler mentioned the address where his mother had last been seen, Margaret dropped the glass she was holding, and the shattered glass reverberated throughout the immaculate house. Something wasn't right, and the boy stood shivering, waiting for an answer. Richard muttered, his voice tight, beckoning Margaret back into the house. Margaret whispered frantically to Richard, her words too low for Tyler to hear, but her tone betrayed a desperation she couldn't hide. When Richard eventually went back to Tyler and said, "Come inside, we need to talk," Tyler had no idea that what was about to happen would reveal a terrible secret that some people would kill to keep hidden. Richard led Tyler into the large living room, where the grandeur and warmth stand in sharp contrast to the icy cold. A family portrait of Richard, Margaret, and a teenage girl with a bright smile on the mantel caught Tyler's attention after he had just left. It seemed like a window into a life he had only ever imagined. Margaret brought a blanket and draped it over Tyler's scrawny shoulders. Her palm, she said, "Your mother's name is Elaine Grant," and her eyes were filled with unsaid emotion as she knelt down to his level. "Yes, Tyler," she said, her voice shaking. "She used to work downtown, but 2 years ago she just vanished. Maybe she left me on purpose, but I know she wouldn't just leave me like that," the shelter said, and he looked down ashamed of his tears. Margaret gave Richard a stern look as if he were having trouble with shame or fear, and she pressed him. "Does this name have any significance for you, Richard?" Richard averted her eyes and rubbed his temple as though he were attempting to block out a head. "Not now," he whispered. "The voice of Margaret Rose's feelings are exploding as a boy knocks on our house looking for a woman who could be stopping." Richard yelled, surprising them both, and turned to face Tyler, his face blank. "You mentioned that she vanished 2 years ago. Did you ever see her with anyone?" Tyler scowled as he recalled a man who was tall, always wearing a suit, and occasionally appeared before she vanished, but she always warned me to avoid him, claiming he wasn't safe. Margaret's face turned ashen as she suddenly rose up, holding her chest as though the room's air had been drawn out. Richard took her arm and said, "Don't you," in a quiet, forceful voice, but Margaret was unable to control herself. "I recognize her name, Richard. She was employed at your company, wasn't she?" Elaine Grant muttered, her eyes wide with terror. Tyler looked up, perplexed, "But she never told me where she worked, so I had no idea." Richard clenched his fists and whitened his knuckles, saying, "This isn't the time to dig up old wounds." His voice clipped, but Margaret was no longer paying attention. Her eyes were fixed on Tyler's face, and her expression softened into something almost maternal. "Sweetheart," she said softly, kneeling back down, "did your mom ever tell you anything about her job and the people she worked with?" Tyler shook his head and simply said, "It was hard sometimes, but she always made time for me." Margaret's lip trembled. "She truly did love you. Even when she was exhausted, Tyler would sing to me before bed. Even when we didn't have a house, Margaret came out and dragged him into it." She mumbled, "I'm so sorry," but Tyler was still perplexed. "Why are you sorry?" "Do you know where she is?" he said, embracing her as her tears began to pour freely. Margaret chose not to respond, instead glancing over Richard's shoulder with an accusatory expression. "Tell him what." Richard snapped his voice at, Margaret replied. His jaw tightened as he realized that his mother had gotten involved in something she shouldn't have. Margaret's tone was broken. "You must tell him the truth." "Richard, Tyler's head will crack between them if you don't tell him." Richard's shoulders slumped as he finally looked Tyler in the eyes. Panic rising in his chest. "What truth are you talking about? Your mother was trying to expose something dangerous, and she paid the price for it." Margaret gasped, "Knowing that I tried to stop her." Richard exploded. "I told her to back off, saying it wasn't safe, but she wouldn't listen." Tyler's voice was shaking as he demanded. Richard paused, then muttered, "Me?" The room became eerily quiet. Tyler gazed at him, asking himself, "What do you mean?" Margaret's hands went to her lips. "Oh my God," and she mumbled as she moved away from Richard. Richard gulped hard, thinking that she was doing the right thing, but she didn't realize how serious it was. "When your mother discovered information about my firm that might have destroyed me." Richard didn't respond, but his silence said a lot. Margaret whirled on him, her voice a mixture of incredulity and rage. "You mean to tell me that she vanished because of you?" Tyler got up. His voice was hardly audible as he questioned, his pulse thumping in his chest. "What happened to her?" When Richard eventually turned to face him, his expression was one of sadness. "I'm not sure, but if she's still alive, she's not safe." The boy's knees failed him, and he fell beneath the couch, his world going completely crazy. As the weight of Richard's words set in, Tyler understood that finding his mother was just the start of a much darker journey that would reveal things he wasn't prepared to confront. Margaret hurried to his side, but her touch felt remote, as if nothing could console him now. Richard's revelation made Tyler's slender physique tremble as he sat on the couch. Margaret knelt next to him and whispered, "We'll figure this out. I swear, we'll find her." "You don't understand," Richard said, pacing the room with his hands through his graying hair. "If she's still alive, there are powerful people who won't let her stay that way if we start digging around." Tyler looked up at him, his eyes full of a quiet, simmering rage. "So what?" he asked. "You're just going to let her disappear forever. You're the reason she's gone." Richard turned to face Tyler, saying, "You're staying here tonight. You're not going back to the streets. We'll figure out what to do in the morning." Tyler shook his head. "I can't stay here. They'll know I came to you, and they'll come after me too." Richard froze, guilt flashing across his face, and opened his mouth to respond, but Margaret interrupted him. Richard let out a sigh and lowered his voice to a whisper. "He's correct. If they discover, none of us will be secure." "Poor they." Margaret insisted in speaking up. "Ascending, don't you dare say that to me, Richard. This boy deserves answers." Margaret stood with her eyes burning, and Richard's face tightened. "It's better if you don't know her." Before he eventually gave up, Richard paused. "Some of the folks I worked with aren't simply business people. They deal with people who cause issues for the company and make those issues go away." His voice broke when Elaine approached something she shouldn't have, and I was powerless to stop it. "You're implying that you let them to harm her because Tyler's voice was so chilly." Richard's face fell, and there was nothing I could do. "He said that if ID had attempted to stop them, they would have pursued my family. I assumed that if I had remained out of the way, she would have fled and remained hidden." The trail was unable to continue, and the chamber became quiet save for the crackling fire. "I don't care how dangerous they are," Tyler stated quietly as he stood there staring at Richard with an unreadable expression. Margaret then reached for him. Tyler paused, then he added, "She's everything to me, and even though it's risky, I won't give up on finding her. If you go after them, they'll kill you. You don't understand how these people work." Richard moved closer, his face pressed sadly. Tyler scowled at him, then said, "Tell me how they work. Tell me everything you know." Richard hesitated, divided between guilt and terror, and then he muttered, "Fine, but if we do this, we do it my way. I know people who can help us, but they must keep quiet if they discover that he didn't finish the sentence." Margaret gave her voice a nod. "Without a doubt, we begin tonight. You're not alone in this, Tyler." Looking at her, Tyler's rage subsided as he questioned, "Why are you helping me?" Margaret's voice broke because I would want someone to assist my daughter for the first time if she were in that situation. As the three of them started to put together a strategy, Tyler let himself experience a glimmer of hope. They were all unaware of the shadowy figure observing their every move from outside the enormous bay window. The figure took out a phone and dialed a number. When the connection went through, they talked in a low, gruff voice. The youngster recognized it, and now the family was engaged. "What are your orders?" "Take care of it, everyone," the figure said, a chilly voice on the other end. Fled into the night as Tyler, unbeknownst to them, Margaret and Richard entered a web of peril that was far more sinister than they could have ever imagined. The battle to find Elaine had already started, but as the walls closed in around them, it became evident that this wasn't just about finding her, it was about surviving.